There are varying degrees of evil. We urge you lesser forms of filth not to push the bounds and cross over into true corruption, into our domain.
But if you do, one day you will look behind you and you will see we three. And on that day, you will reap it.
And we will send you to whatever God you wish.
And shepherds we shall be, for thee, my lord, for thee. Power hath descended forth from thy hand. May swiftly carry out thy command. So we shall flow river forth to thee, and teeming with souls shall it ever be. In nomine Patri,
Et Filii, Spiritus Sancti.
Welcome to The Real Illuminati Exposed, the Group of 30. And today we're going to take a look at this group of central bankers. And right off the bat, we can see their logo comes from the black sun known as Saturn. Every year it's 30 members, and they call themselves the G30, and is generally the heads of the central banks and the largest banks on the planet and some of the largest corporations. It's invite only, and it's held in secret. This is how I do my research on this channel. Take it right from rush hour. Let me introduce you to Carter's theory of criminal investigation. Follow the rich white man. And that's what we're going to do here, so let's follow the money. So if we go to the Wikipedia page for the Group of 30, it says it consists of 30 members and includes the heads of major private banks and central banks, as well as members from academia and international institutions. Then in the next paragraph it says, the Group of 30 was founded in 1978 by Jeffrey Bell at the initiative of the Rockefeller Foundation, which also provided initial funding for the body. Its first chairman was Johannes Witteveen, the former managing director of the International Monetary Fund. The G30's current chairman is Jean-Claude Trichet. Its current chairman of the board of trustees is Jacob Frenkel, and Paul Volcker is chairman emeritus. So let's take a look at David Rockefeller, the founding member of this group, and what he thinks the role of central banks are and why they need privacy in order to move forward. Quote, "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries." So here they're saying national governments shouldn't exist, it's bankers that should rule the world. So as the Group of 30 has been set up to rule over us, let's see what they're all about. Go to group30.org, and on their About Us section it says, the Group of the 30, established in 1978, is a private, non-profit, international body composed of very senior representatives of the private and public sectors and academia, aims to deepen an understanding of international economic and financial issues, to explore the international repercussions of decisions taken in the public and private sectors, to examine the choices available to market practitioners and policymakers. Thus stating they control the policymakers and the market practitioners. Reading on, it says, members. The Group of 30 membership includes leading policymakers from central banks, supervisory agencies, the financial sector, and academia. The membership is broad-based, highly influential, individually and collectively, and spans the globe. They have a work program, and they also put out publications, and events are held in private so that they can discuss things without the light of publicity affecting their discussion. So even if they don't want us to know what they're talking about, we can at least know who is there and talking. And almost every one of these guys is tied into a central bank or the Federal Reserve System. You have Paul A. Volcker, Jacob A. Frenkel, Jean-Claude Trichet, Guillermo Ortiz, Lejic, I can't say this name, Balkarovic, I don't know, excuse me on that one, Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England, all central bankers. Moving along our wonderful VIP guest list, and excuse me if I get any of these names wrong, you have Jaime Quarina, former Governor Banco de Spain, Domingo Cavallo, former Ministry of Economy Argentina, Mario Draghi, former governor of the Bank of Italy, William C. Dudley, President, Federal Reserve Bank, Goldman Sachs, you have Roger W. Ferguson Jr., and Arminio Fra. And of course, you have Timothy Geithner, directly responsible, with many other people, for the 2008 collapse. Then you have Gerd Hausler, Philip Hildebrand, Gail Kelly, Mervyn King, and Paul Krugman, former member Council of Economic Advisors. Moving right along, we got Haruko Kuroda, Asian Development Bank, Christian Neuer, Bank for International Settlements, Raghuranji Rajan, Economics Chicago, Booth School of Business, Kenneth Rogoff, Tharman Shanmugaratnam, Masaki Shirakawa. So you can see these are all central bankers or members of academia or corporate, and they're spanning the entire globe. The next 6 are Lawrence Summers, former U.S. Treasury Secretary, Tijani Tiam, former CEO, Prudential PLC, Adair Turner, former Chairman, Financial Services Authority, Kevin Warsh, Alex Weber, Ernesto Zedillo, former President of Mexico. And last but not least, and I'll definitely brutalize this name, is Zhao Shiquan, Chinese Construction Bank. The 3 senior members are E. Gerald Corrigan, Managing Director of Goldman Sachs, former President of the Federal Reserve of New York, Guillermo de la Dehesa, and Yukata Yamaguchi. The emeritus members of this group are Ablatif Al-Hamand, Jeffrey L. Bell, Richard A. Debs, Jacques de Larosière, Martin Feldstein, and Gerald Helds. More emeritus members include Toyu Gayotan, John Hyman, Eric Hoffmeyer, William McDonough, Sylvia Austry, William R. Rhodes. The last 3 emeritus members are Ernest Stern, former Managing Director of the World Bank, David Walker, former Chairman of Barclays, which is the Rothschilds Bank, and Marina N. Whitman, former Professor of University of Michigan and former member of the Council of Economic Advisors. You can see how these members span the entire globe and are able to control basically everything in society through finance. Here we can see some of the past members, and feel free to just look through this list. I'm not going to read all these names off, but you can see that these people really do come from every part of the globe, and it allows them to control many things in society without actually having control of the entire organization. They just control the director, and the director then steers every organization the way they want. And that's exactly how roundtable groups work. The executive directors are the ones actually paid by this group, and I'll prove that later with the tax return of theirs. And you can see here the past executive directors and who they are and when they served. Group of 30.
Spaceport. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
The only views inside this meeting we have come from their own photographers, so we can just take a look at some of these pictures that they released on their website and see what the meetings look like, or, you know, whatever. As this group always meets in secret, and most of their publications are in secret, we can only analyze what they put out in the public and then speculate as to what's going on behind the scenes. So their work program defined as: the group regularly launches study groups to analyze topics of particular or systemic importance to central banks supervisors, financial firms, and participants in global financial markets. Each study group's leadership and membership is drawn from the G30 membership, but the teams can be broader than that of the group, meaning there's other people involved than just people on the list, including experts from specialized fields in economics, finance, and academia. Study participants work together to offer actionable solutions, policy recommendations, and examples of best practices in the area being studied. Previous study groups have included topics on the reform of International Monetary Fund, financial reform, regulatory supervision, and greater accounting standards. Of course, their current working group is focusing on shadow banking and market finance. The group of 30 commenced a study on shadow banking and non-bank credit intermediation in December 2014. Steering committee led by Adair Turner as chairman, with Jacques Larousseau and Masaki Shirakawa serving as vice chairs. They're going to identify how shadow banking risks are evolving and the appropriate policies required to encourage sustainable market finance. So they're basically telling you that they're going to go after anyone that is not banking in their financial system. And that's probably why the Panama Papers happened, because that was aimed at anyone who wasn't using their financial system. So because this group operates within their financial system and their 501c3 charity, their tax return is publicly available on the IRS website, and their EIN number displayed on the screen is 13-296-6004, and they're called the Group of 30. So you can see easily found online is all their basic tax information and information about their group in terms of their legal status. Available is also their 990 forms, which gives you a lot of their basic information. And as they are a charitable organization, they take in about $800,000 a year, half of which is tax-free, and they have a total asset value of over $2 million, and this was in 2013. And the stated goal of this charity is to basically analyze global economics and tell policymakers what to do. Of the money they raised for this charitable donation, about a quarter of it goes to their annual meeting, where they spend over $100,000 to host 30-something people in a hotel for a few days. And for his guidance and expert wisdom, Stuart McIntosh was paid $180,000 in 2013 just to be the director of this group. It's an important section from one of their publications on their website, and it reads, "The history of central banks and central banking has been and continues to be inextricably linked to medium-term growth and stability of national economies in the international monetary system. By 2015, central banks were the most prominent players in the global policy arena. They've been charged with different mandates and having growing responsibilities. However, despite variations in their mandates and their economic circumstances, they've all confronted common challenges." Later it reads, "Central banks alone cannot be relied upon to deliver all policies necessary to achieve macroeconomic goals. Governments must also act and use their policy-making space provided by conventional and unconventional monetary policy measures. Failure to do so would be a serious error and would risk setting the stage for future economic disturbances and imbalances in the future." As this report makes clear, central banks and other governmental actors must continuously strive to identify future imbalances, policy weaknesses, and unintended policy outcomes and be prepared to deal with them as they arise, thus saying government is their act. Another extremely important section in one of their documents. Some historical perspective. Early central banks were commonly set up to provide finance to help fund wartime governments. They're saying they fund both sides of every war. In return, they were given certain advantages that initially enabled them to become the largest commercial bank, the manager of government debt, and the main issuer of currency notes. As a large private bank, they also came to occupy a central position facilitating interbank transactions, providing an array of services to correspondent banks. And it reads on later to say, "On the one hand, such a system provides a welcome form of lubrication for the real economy, like, quantitative easing. where they just completely devalue the currency. On the other hand, unfettered monetary and credit creation has the potential to generate inflation and create unsustainable distortions in both the financial sector and the real economy. And I would say that's pretty much what's going on in the world, where you have all the money in the hands of a very increasingly small number of people, and the rest of us struggling harder and harder just to get by because the money is becoming worth less and less. The last paragraph here talks about how they used to be on a gold standard, which kept the price much more stable, and they're setting the world up for a global economic collapse so they can return us to their gold standard. Also notice in this last paragraph how they call themselves the regime, and throughout this document they call themselves the regime. It says, this regime was based on a credible commitment of the central bank to exchange it in its notes for gold at a fixed price. But throughout this document they call themselves the regime. To understand this next section, you really need to go out and read a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Now, this is talking about the breakdown of the Bretton Woods system, which was then followed by a sharp acceleration of inflationary pressures worldwide in a deep recession. When they were freed from international constraints, the central banks had focused their monetary policy on reducing unemployment, which basically caused inflationary expectations to quickly rise because they overprinted the money, just like they did recently with quantitative easing to fight unemployment, which did nothing but devalue the currency. And it goes on to talk about how they needed the oil-producing countries to start taking on loans because they weren't spending enough money without doing that. So they basically forced what they call the emerging market economies to take on loans, which then backfired because there was another change in the oil price, and now those countries can't pay off the loans. So that's exactly what Confessions of an Economic Hitman was all about. And that's how they take over these countries. They give them loans, and then they give them loans that they can never pay off, so then they end up paying those loans off by giving them a percentage of the oil they pump out of the ground. It's totally nefarious, and they absolutely do it on purpose. Another part of the document talks about the role of central banks. Fostering financial stability should also be an important part of a central bank's mandate. Avoiding excessive credit dynamics is instrumental in achieving this objective, since the accumulations of debt over time can lead to growing imbalances to both the real and financial sectors that can culminate in systemic financial crisis. Central banks should be given responsibility for identifying such systemic threats and for trying to offset related risks to long-term price stability. This implies that central banks must have ultimate authority over all relevant policy tools, including macro-prudential instruments, just saying their role is to control all policy. The next paragraph is, it is crucial that the independence of central banks be maintained, and it talks about how they need to be independent of basically the pressures from the people within the countries that they're ruling over. According to them, what they learned from 2007 is that serious and financial crises can happen, and even in low inflation advanced market economies, so they need to have the same bail-in things that they had in places like Cyprus in place in countries like America. In the last paragraph here, it says central banks have a crucial role to play in crisis management, and in particular in ensuring the stability and smooth functioning of the financial system. And that's what their only function is to ensure the stability and smooth functioning of the financial system. No matter what crises they create, as long as they can control them, they can continue this financial system indefinitely. Their conclusion is, central banks worked alongside governments to address the unfolding crisis during 2007 to 2009, and their actions were a necessary and appropriate crisis management response. But central bank policies alone should not be expected to deliver sustainable economic growth. Such policies must be complemented by other policy measures implemented by governments. At present, much remains to be done by governments, parliaments, public authorities, and the private sector to tackle policy, economic, and structural weaknesses that originate outside the control or influence of central banks. In order to contribute to sustainable economic growth, The report presumes that all other actors, that's right, you're all actors to them, just fulfilling their role, fulfill their responsibilities, and that's exactly what this is about. They're saying that all the problems in the world are created by things that they don't control, so if they can just gain control of all those things, there won't be any more problems. Conclusion: the financial system runs the world, and we run the financial system. To most of these people, this is their God. I would suggest adding the group of 30 to this little picture, probably right at the top. And this central banking scheme fits into a much larger scheme for a world government. Quote, the most powerful cliques in these elitist groups, Council of Foreign Relations, Trilateral Commission, and others, such as the group of 30, have one objective: to bring about the surrender of the sovereignty and independence of the United States of America. The second clique of international members in the CFR compromise the Wall Street international bankers and their key agents. Primarily, they want the world banking monopoly from whatever power ends up in the control of global government. They would probably prefer that this be an all-powerful United Nations organization, but they are also prepared to deal with and for a one-world government controlled by the Soviet communists if U.S. sovereignty is ever surrendered to them, or to international socialists. Statements by Rear Admiral Chester Ward, former CFR member, review of the news, and it's important to remember when reading this that the Illuminati central bankers actually created the Soviet communists. This next quote by Charles August Lindbergh Sr., U.S. Congressman from 1907 to 1917, is very prophetic in regards to the international monetary system in America called the Federal Reserve, which is a private central bank. States, this Federal Reserve Act establishes the most gigantic trust on earth. When President Woodrow Wilson signs this bill, the invisible government of the monetary power will be legalized. The worst legislative crime of the age is perpetrated by this banking and currency bill. The financial system has been turned over to the Federal Reserve Board. That board administers the finance system by authority of a purely profiteering group, the Group of 30, adding that. The system is private, conducted for the sole purpose of obtaining the greatest possible profits from the use of other people's money. From now on, depressions will be scientifically created like two con men working a mark. The Fed made credit easy, while the establishment newspapers hype what riches can be made in the stock market. If you turn on the news today, that's exactly what's going on, where you have everyone talking about how much money you can make in the stock market. Please. Like 90% of the money in the stock market is owned by asset managers who manipulate the funds for their own benefit.
I feel strongly that Geithner, this is AIG, Goldman, and you know what? The Bavarian Illuminati, the Trilateral Commission, Goldman Sachs, and the Queen of England are not all bad.
This next quote comes from President Bill Clinton's own professor, Carol Quigley, at Georgetown University, from his book Tragedy and Hope. Quote, powers of financial capitalism had another far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. The system was to be controlled in feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world, acting in concert by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences. The apex of this system was the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central bankers, which were themselves private corporations. The growth of financial capitalism made possible a centralization of world economic control and use of this power for the direct benefit of financiers and the indirect injury of all other economic groups. The American Revolution was caused by entrepreneurs who wanted to operate outside of the Bank of England's central banking system by creating their own currency called colonials, which in turn the Central Bank of England counterfeited to destroy. Quote, the refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators was probably the prime cause of the revolution. It wasn't probably, it was the cause of the revolution, because everything is always about money, and so was our own revolution. So what is the answer to this problem? It's as simple as this. Quote, the issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. Thomas Jefferson. And yes, it is that simple. The answer to all of our economic problems is to simply end the Federal Reserve, create an actual American currency, and replace the Federal Reserve note, which was printed as debt plus interest, with an American currency, and therefore ending the central bank's control of America. The end. If Congress possessed the power to establish one bank, they had the power to establish more than one if, in their opinion, 2 or more banks had been necessary to facilitate the execution of the powers delegated to them in the Constitution. It cannot be necessary or proper for Congress to barter away or divest themselves of any of the powers vested in them by the Constitution to be exercised for the public good. They may not properly use the discretion vested in them, but they may not limit the discretion of their successors. This restriction on themselves and grant of a monopoly to the bank is therefore unconstitutional. Andrew Jackson. And he's right. The Federal Reserve is a private central bank and is an unconstitutional monopoly by any standard. It needs to be ended immediately. The best documentary on the solutions for this financial system is in the film The Secret of Oz by Bill Still, which discusses how the original book by Frank L. Baum was replete with symbolism discussing how to replace the Federal Reserve System with a system that is based on the government printing its own money, because, as Bill Still said, the only thing that matters is who controls the quantity of money. It does not matter what the money is based on. To quote Aaron Swartz, "This is your life, this is your country, and if you want to keep it safe, you need to get involved." And he's absolutely right, because not one of the presidential candidates, not even the Libertarian Party, is saying end the Federal Reserve. So if we want to change this system, we're going to have to get out there and get involved and wake people up and make this a topic of discussion, because if we don't, it never will be. To quote Lao Tzu, "If you do not change direction, you may end up where you're heading." And we all know where this system is heading, and it's not somewhere that we want to be. Thank you so much for watching The Real Illuminati Exposed, The Group of 30. If you like this video, please hit the like button. Please subscribe. I'll be coming back with plenty of more information just like this. And please share this video so other people can get this important information. And as always, get out there and let other people know what's going on, because we need to change the system before the system completely clamps down on us. Thanks, and have a nice day.
The world has been broke down. The world is just announced. The final time is now. The final time to bow. But I will not get down, for you can't force me now. Awakening is clear. I could show you how. I could show